people. Now, Moshe reminds the Jewish people to look at history and learn from history. And he says, remember the days of old. Understand the years of generation after generation. It often helps if you're not sure what's going on. If you can't understand the present, look at your past. Look at your nation's past. Look at the world history. And then everything will become clear. You can look at lives of your parents, see where they succeeded, see where they failed. Try to understand what mistakes they made in their character, in their ways, in their decisions, and learn from it, and don't make the same mistakes, and change your character. Look at your grandparents. Look at your ancestors as far as you can remember and research. And you can find something remarkable. What I found was that my ancestors, as ancestors of almost every Jew, have lived in some countries peacefully for some years before the exile came, before the persecution came, before death or pogrom or stealing all their property came. They lived peacefully for sometimes hundreds of years, sometimes even 1,000 years. And what did they do? They got comfortable, they started doing business, buying fields, building houses and factories, getting servants, horses, chariots, fur coats, vacations, at the expense of their service of God, at the expense of their Torah study. Often they wanted to become modern, cultured, fancy, and they adopted the dress of the non-Jews, and they slowly forgot about their Judaism. But in every country that the Jewish people ever lived in, time came, the non-Jews attacked them. Some they killed, some they raped, some they maimed, some they sent to Siberia, some they simply took their stuff away and threw them out of the country. Some they forcibly converted. And then the Jewish people look back and say, for hundreds of years, while I had time, I could have learned, I could have done mitzvot, I could have done charity, I could have grown in my character, I could have developed generations and generations of children and grandchildren. And instead, I was worrying about my security, my comfort, my pleasure, my honor, and I forgot about God, and now I'm left with nothing. That's what happened to the Jewish people in Russia, and specifically in Uzbekistan, where I'm from, that the communists came and they confiscated all private property, and whoever had too much or tried to resist, they killed, sent to Siberia. Whoever could escaped empty-handed, and whoever didn't stayed under Soviet rule, now in poverty, or worse, in Siberia. And then they looked back and said, when I had freedom and when I had wealth, what did I do? I was a businessman and I was proud of it, being a merchant, traveling different countries, doing business. Is that what I'm proud of? And what do I have to show for it now? Everything that I earned now belongs to the communist government. My houses are now government buildings and banks. And I am poor on a dirt floor. For what? I wasted my life and my ancestors wasted theirs. So Moshe is telling the Jewish people, remember the days of old. Understand the years of generation after generation. Ask your father, and he will relate it to you. Your elders, and they will tell you. It's very beneficial to speak to someone older, because with their age, they have wisdom. And with their frailty, when they cannot chew anymore, when they cannot run after the opposite gender anymore, when they cannot walk with their chest puffed up in arrogance and their neck and nose stretched out to the sky, they're bent, their teeth are not there anymore, they don't have the strength. Now finally they realize what is important. And they will give you a good advice. They will give you advice about things here on earth. Not imaginary hot air that they have been looking when they were young. They will tell you about the family. They will tell you about your own character. They will tell you about being a good person, a trustworthy person, to be a good friend, a good child to your parents, to be a good sibling and a good spouse and a good parent. They will tell you that you should take your God seriously. They will tell you that that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day, at the end of the life. Everything else can be taken away from you, your money, your titles, your job, you're retired, your health, your strength, your eyesight, your sense of smell and taste and hearing. Everything is taken away. But your connection to God and the generations of upright, righteous children that you raised will stay forever. Ask your father, and he will relate it to you. Your elders, and they will tell you. Now, Moshe is reminding the Jewish people of the early history. When the Supreme One, when God gave the nations their inheritance, when Hashem divided the earth into boundaries and he gave each country, each nation their land according to the number of children of Israel. The number of Jewish descendants, children of Yaakov, that went into Egypt, there were 70 of them. That's how many basic nations there were. Because as we said, the Jewish people are managers of the world. The Jewish people are like the guardian angels of the world. And for every original Jew that went into Egypt, there was a country that he was responsible for. And even now, the Talmud says that the blessing that has to come to the entire earth is measured according to the merit of the Jewish people. And when the Jewish people used to live in Israel, the blessing would first come into the Beit HaMikdash, into Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, and then it would spread into the rest of the land of Israel, and from there it would spread across the world. If the Jewish people were righteous, this pipe was fully open and abundance came to the entire world. When the Jewish people sinned or served idols, they closed the pipe, they shut off the valve, and less prosperity came. And then the nations of the world, because they didn't have enough in their own land, they would now go and conquer other people. And they would then come and conquer the land of Israel and the Jewish people. Because they instinctively understood why it's happening to them. Who is the source of their trouble? As if by magic they would all come to Israel, whether it was the Babylonians, whether it was the Greeks or the Romans or the Christians and later the Muslims. Each one ended up coming to Israel. Why Israel? because they know that is where it's hidden. That is the pipeline. We need to conquer it and we need to open it up. We need to access the bounty, the plenty. Everyone wants to have their real estate in Israel. Now, verse 9. Although Hashem gave each nation their own land, their own portion, Hashem loves the Jewish people the most. For Hashem's portion is his people. Yaakov is the measure of his inheritance. Which means, if you want to know how much inheritance Hashem has, how much wealth God has, Yaakov, the Jewish people, is the measure of God's inheritance. If you measure how many Jews there are in the world, you are measuring God's wealth. Every Jew is another diamond in God's treasury. And not only that, a Jew that follows God's command is a bigger diamond, is a more polished, more clean diamond, more shiny. A Jew that doesn't keep the Torah, so Hashem says, he's still my little diamond. I still hope that one day he's going to clean himself from dirt. But in the meantime, he's dirty. I'm going to still keep him close to me, but I'm going to put him in my pocket. Now, I'm not going to show him off because I'm a little bit embarrassed that he dirtied himself. But any Jew who learns Torah, who keeps Shabbat, who keeps Kashrut, who prays to God, is a shining diamond, like a star. And God puts him for everyone to see. That is why Jewish people are so famous, because God prides himself with the Jews. Yaakov, the Jewish people, is the measure of God's inheritance. And now Moshe goes through history and recounts God's kindness to the Jewish people. He discovered him in a desert, in desolation, in howling wilderness. When Hashem took the Jewish people out of Egypt, they were young. They haven't committed themselves to God. They traveled in the desert to Mount Sinai. He encircled him, which means God encircled the Jewish people with clouds of glory. He granted him discernment. He gave the Jewish people understanding. When the Jewish people came to Mount Sinai, and Hashem offered them a choice, would you like to take the Torah or not? Hashem gave them understanding and wisdom to choose to accept the Torah. He preserved the Jewish people like the pupil of his eye. Just like our eye, we protect it with our eyelids, with our eyelashes, with our eyebrows, with our goggles, with our hands. We have so many instruments to protect the eyes because they are so precious. The Jewish people are considered like the pupil, the most important part of Hashem. Hashem preserved the Jewish people like his own eye. Hashem was like an eagle arousing his nest. When an eagle comes to his nest, he doesn't swoop down and crash into it. He can break it, and he can break the eggs, and he can kill the chicks. Rather, he arouses it. He flies around to make sure the chicks are awake, to make sure they are ready for his descent, and then he slowly comes closer and hovers, as it says, hovering over its young. So to Hashem, He does not overburden us with His presence. Like we said, He gives us Torah in the amount that we can manage. Like a nursing baby who is drinking milk from his mother. And again, like an eagle spreading its wings and taking his children, carrying them on his wings. Hashem alone guided them, and no other power was with them. Throughout the 40 years in the desert, Hashem alone protected them and supplied them with all their needs. With care and security. He would make him ride on the heights of the land. They had the best. And have him eat the ripe fruits of the fields, not imported from far away, harvested when still unripe, but ripe fruit of the field. The juicy, sweet fruit at the height of its ripeness. He would give them suck on the honey from a stone, which means from seemingly a rock that cannot produce anything, he gave them sweet water and oil from a flinty rock. The water that they received gave them not only the liquid, but our sages say that it had the taste of Gan Eden. It tasted like honey and like oil. Very nutritious and delicious. Butter of cows and milk of sheep with fat of lambs. Rams born in a place called Bashan, and goats. With wheat as fat as kidneys. Each kernel is like a kidney. And you would drink blood of grapes. The juice, grape juice, was as thick as blood, like delicious wine. The grape juice that was coming out of grapes was already intoxicating like wine. Moshe is now switching into the future, and he's saying when the Jewish people will come into the land, this is what's awaiting for them. Not only Hashem carried them on his wings for 40 years and supplied them with food and drink from rocks, but when they come into the land, they're going to have very fertile land with wheat kernels as big as kidneys. And grapes are going to produce wine directly from grapes. However, as we mentioned multiple times before, verse 15 tells us that prosperity and abundance leads to rebellion and laziness. Yeshurun is another name for the Jewish people. When they are on the highest level, when they have everything, when they're close to God, it seems perfect, but that presents the most difficult test. Yeshurun became fat. The Jewish people became too comfortable, too wealthy, overfed, and they kicked. They rebelled against God. You became fat. You became thick. You became corpulent. Various names for the same thing. That when a person eats too much, he has too much, he says, I don't need to work. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to follow any rules. I have everything I need. I'm safe. I have no boss over me. And the Jewish people deserted God, its creator, and was contemptuous of the rock of its salvation. The Eternal One, who was always there to protect them, all of a sudden they forgot about him. They would provoke his jealousy with strangers. Again, Moshe is speaking in the past, but about the future. That the Jewish people, he gives prophecy, will serve idols, which arouse jealousy because they are strange foreign gods. They would anger him with abominations. Both idol worship as well as forbidden sexual relations are called abominations. And verse 17 describes this in more detail. They would slaughter sacrifices to demons without power, to gods whom they knew not, gods with a small letter G, newcomers, recently arrived, new religions, new gods that were brought from foreign countries, whom your ancestors did not dread. You ignored the rock who gave birth to you. You forgot God who brought you forth. And now, as a result, Moshe says, is going to go in cycles. The Jewish people will have the best. They will take it for granted. They will ignore God. They will serve idols. Then the descent will start. There will be trouble and punishment. And then the Jewish people will do teshuvah and they will come back. And again, they will have prosperity and goodness. And the test is, if they remain good, they will stay on top forever. Hashem will see and be provoked by the anger of his sons and daughters. Hashem is not blind, and he will not turn a blind eye to what the Jewish people are doing. The Jewish people are too precious for him. They are his treasure. They are his chosen people. They are the reason why he created the world. And therefore, he's not just going to ignore them and say, okay, let them do whatever they want, I don't care. No. Just like when a parent sees some neighbor kid who they don't know is doing trouble, they're going to ignore. I don't care about him. Let him get into trouble. Let police take him away. But if parents see their own child doing even a tiny bit wrong, they will right away rebuke him. They will right away send him to his room because they care about him. So Hashem will see and be provoked by the anger of his sons and daughters. And he will say, I shall hide my face from them and see what their end will be. For they are a generation of reversals, children whose upbringing is not in them. They provoked me with a non-God, angered me with their vanities. They served idols, and therefore I shall provoke them with a non-people. I will send against them not a known nation, but a non-people. With a vile nation shall I anger them. This is a prophecy for all generations, but we have seen it in our times. When the Jewish people came to the land of Israel 70 years ago, 80 years ago, most of them were communists that came from Russia, looking for a new land to transplant their evil ideas of mass control. And being atheists, they implanted atheism in the land of Israel. And Hashem said, you provoked me with a non-God, with the fact that there is no God. That's what you're trying to inculcate in people. That's what you're teaching them in schools, that there is no God. I shall provoke them with a non-people. So Hashem said, I will send against them a nation that's not a people, not a nation, not a country. There's no such nation. Palestinians. And for already 70 years, the mighty state of Israel is fighting a non-nation. A nation that's not recognized by anyone. Why? Because they don't recognize God. So Hashem says, I'm going to send against you people that are not recognized as a nation. As soon as the Jewish people will, in their land of Israel, will recognize God and will teach about Judaism in their public schools, they will teach Jewish history and Jewish religion instead of teaching other people's histories and other people's religions. As soon as they turn back to God, Hashem will take away the Palestinian problem from us. This is what we see in verse 21. Now, verse 22. For fire will have been kindled in my nostrils. This describes the strong anger that God will have against the Jews, and blaze to the lowest depths. This fire will consume everything till the bottom. It shall consume the earth and its produce, and set ablaze what is founded on mountains. I shall now different curses are listed. I shall accumulate evil against them. My arrows shall I use up against them. Famine and demons and diseases and wild animals I will dispatch against them. Verse 25, on the outside the sword will kill, while indoors there will be disease. Even a young man who seemingly is strong, even a virgin, a suckling, a nursing baby, together with a gray-haired man will die. Without understanding. Why is everybody dying? Those that are on battlefield are dying from sword. Those that are inside are dying from things that we cannot see. I had said, now Hashem continues his punishment, I will scatter them. Another prediction, the Jewish people will be scattered around the world. I will cause their memory to cease from man, as some nations try to do it, to wipe out the Jewish people from the face of the earth. Now Hashem says, there will be an end to it. And who will bring the end? The nations of the world. How? Our own enemies will stop our punishment from Hashem. Hashem said in verse 27, were it not that the anger of the enemy was pent up, lest his tormentors misinterpret, lest they say, our hand was raised in triumph, and it was not Hashem who accomplished all this. Hashem says that time will come when the nations, after persecuting the Jewish people and almost destroying them, will say, we have won against God's people. We have punished them. We have banished them. We removed the Jews from this country. And Hashem will say, you foolish people, didn't you understand that I was angry at the Jews? I caused them to be punished. I inspired you to attack them. I allowed you to succeed. And because you're making this mistake and you think that it's the doing of your hand, I'm going to stop you so that you see that you are powerless against the Jews. For they are a nation bereft of counsel. They have no discernment in them. They act wildly